Warning. Viewer discretion is advised. It was just another Indian summer in May of 2008. When the quiet suburban streets of Noida, India, were shattered by a chilling discovery. Two victims, a young girl, Aarushi Talwar, 13 years old, and a 45-year-old man, Hemraj Banjade, the family's domestic help. Both brutally murdered within the same household, on the same night. No signs of forced entry. The killer was someone who obviously knew the family. Right? But who? And why? To understand this, we must begin with the timeline, unravel it thread by thread. I am Sherlock Holmes, and it is my business to know what others do not. Welcome to House of Crimes. Today, we unravel one of the most baffling cold cases in modern Indian history, the Noida Double Murder Case, a case that has eluded justice and clarity for over a decade. But nothing escapes a mind attuned to the art of deduction. The night of May 15, 2008, seemed ordinary. The Talwar family was at ease. Aarushi and mother Dr. Nupa Talwar returned home at 6 p.m. and her father Dr. Rajesh Talwar got back home at 9:30 p.m. A gift, a camera, was presented to their daughter Aarushi as an early birthday present, and some photographs were taken. A moment of peace captured before the storm. By midnight, the house fell into silence. But it was a silence that masked the deadly events soon to follow. Between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m., Aarushi Talwar and Hemraj Banjade were slain, their throats cut with precision. No struggle. No cries for help. The very nature of the wounds suggested a level of proficiency. Someone who understood anatomy. A chilling thought, indeed. The first discovery, Aarushi's lifeless body, tucked under a blanket in her own room. Initially, all eyes were on Hemraj. He had vanished. Had he fled? Was he the killer? The truth, however, would surface 2 days later, in a gruesome revelation. His body, decomposing, was found on the terrace. Locked, inaccessible until then, the terrace was a tomb waiting to be unearthed. Bloodstains on the staircase, bloodstained palm print on the rooftop. Footprints, muddled and indistinct. A whiskey bottle, stained with the blood of both victims, found on the dining table. An odd detail, wouldn't you say? Was this a cold-hearted killer who paused for a drink after the crime? Or something far more sinister? The internet router inside Aarushi's bedroom was active until 12:08 a.m. Aarushi's phone, the last sign of life, was a missed call around midnight. A small window, barely an hour, in which 2 lives were snuffed out. But the killer did not vanish into thin air. They remained, perhaps even tampered with the crime scene. Now, the investigation. What a tangled mess it became. Initial missteps compromised the crime scene. Evidence was mishandled. Key leads went cold. What should have been a clean-cut case soon spiraled into media frenzy and wild speculation. Enter the media, eager to cast judgment. Theories of honor killing made the headlines. Rajesh Talwar, enraged upon finding his daughter in a compromising position with Hemraj, acted in a fit of violent rage, also the police claimed. But such claims lacked concrete evidence. And evidence, dear viewers, is what separates deduction from mere conjecture. The CBI took over, introducing new suspects, 3 domestic helpers. Krishna, Rajkumar, and Vijay. Could these men have conspired to commit the crime? Their interrogations were as questionable as the theory itself. Without hard evidence, they were released. Right, here we are, the 2008 Talwar cold case. A double murder in Noida, India. Aarushi Talwar, a 13-year-old girl, and 45-year-old Hemraj, the family's domestic help. It's a mess, isn't it? But stay with me, because underneath the confusion lies the truth, buried, but not gone. First off, the crime scene itself. Aarushi was found in her bedroom. Her throat slit, head smashed. Odd detail, though, her body was covered by a blanket. The door had an automatic click-shut lock. If locked from outside, could be opened from inside, but could not be opened from outside without a key. The only people who had the key was her parents, the Talwars. Think about that. Whoever did this knew her. Familiarity. They weren't repulsed by the bloody body. Covering someone up after a murder, it's a strange form of care, almost remorse. Then there's Hemraj. Initially missing, but 2 days later, they find his body on the terrace. Same injuries, head trauma, throat slit. Now, how did they miss him the first time? The police, I mean? Quite simple, really. They never bothered to look up there. The terrace door was locked, and guess who conveniently had the only key? Hemraj. This is just the beginning of a long list of missteps. No forced entry. No noise. 2 bodies, 1 house. And the Talwars claim to have heard nothing. A convenient kind of silence, wouldn't you say? Now, let's talk about the post-mortem reports. Both Aarushi and Hemraj were hit on the head with a blunt object before their throats were slit. And there's more. Aarushi's private parts had been cleaned. Suspicious, isn't it? No signs of sexual assault, but cleaning suggests someone was trying to get rid of something, DNA, perhaps. An attempt to throw off investigators. This wasn't a crime of passion. No, this was precise. Controlled. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, and they had the presence of mind to cover their tracks. The scene isn't chaotic, it's deliberate. Here's the part one find puzzling. The Talwars, Aarushi's own parents, were in an awfully big rush to cremate her. Why? The police hadn't finished investigating the body, and yet they were ready to move on. That's not normal. Not unless you're trying to get rid of something, or stop others from looking too closely. I'm not saying they did it, but it's strange behavior. Cremation eliminates evidence. Blood. DNA. Genetics. Anything that could point to the real killer. So what were they afraid of? Or who? Let's not forget the crime scene itself. A bottle of whiskey with bloodstains, Aarushi's and Hemraj's. Both victims, same bottle. That means, after killing them, the murderer had a drink. Sat down and took a sip. Cold, isn't it? It's the kind of thing that suggests the killer wasn't in any hurry. They had time, they had control. They were confident. Or maybe, they were home. And Hemraj's body on the terrace, here's the kicker, blood on the stairs leading up. How does a body end up on the terrace with bloody trail to follow? The body was likely moved. After the fact. The Talwars, a respectable family, dentists, by profession. Under suspicion almost immediately. The police had a theory: Dr. Rajesh Talwar killed his daughter after finding her in a compromising position with Hemraj. But was there any proof? None. Only rumors and whispers. The kind of thing that spreads faster than facts. But the Talwars didn't help themselves, did they? They gave conflicting statements, panicked, rushed Aarushi's cremation, and seemed far too eager to close the case. But was that guilt? Or fear? Fear of what the world would say? Fear of scandal? And then, the local police. They contaminated the crime scene. Mishandled evidence. Hemraj's body wasn't even discovered until the next day, on the terrace. Can you imagine? If the police had done their job properly from the start, maybe we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Instead, they jumped to conclusions, sensationalized by the media, and somewhere along the way, the truth got lost. Or maybe, someone made sure it stayed lost. And then the case took another puzzling turn. 5 years later, in 2013, the Talwars were convicted, their guilt cemented by circumstantial evidence alone. But was this justice or an illusion crafted by the missteps of an incomplete investigation? In 2017, the High Court overturned their conviction. The evidence against them simply did not hold. Why? Yes, the Talwars flat. A seemingly impenetrable fortress of 3 doors, each meant to keep intruders at bay. First, there's the iron grill gate, a mere formality leading to a passage. Then comes the real barrier, 2 doors. The first, an iron mesh door, 2-way lock, it can also be bolted from the outside. Behind it, a wooden door with a click-shut lock. Simple enough, or so it seems. But that's where things get, well, messy. The CBI's theory, that this arrangement proves the Talwars were the only possible killers, hinges entirely on a single witness, the maid. Our illiterate, and likely frightened, maid. She arrives on that fateful morning at 6 a.m., and here's where the inconsistency emerges. In her initial statement, she claims the door, the outer mesh door, was unlocked. Both doors, in fact. A curious detail, don't you think? But then, a month later, her memory seems to have magically shifted. Suddenly, the outer mesh door was locked. But wait! It was only after Dr. Nupa Talwar threw her the keys from the balcony that the maid noticed that she could push the door open. So, let me get this straight. If the door was locked from the inside, as the prosecution suggests, why did the maid ask for the key in the first place? And here lies the crux of it. According to the maid's final testimony, initially the door wasn't just locked, it was bolted from the inside. Which would mean, in theory, no one could have entered or exited after the murders. Perfect proof, right? The double murder could only have been committed by those already inside, the Talwars. Except, there's a gaping hole in this theory. Why did the maid change her story? First, she says the door was open, later, it's locked from the inside. Influenced, perhaps? Coerced? Or, more likely, confused in her shock and trauma. We mustn't forget she's illiterate, an ordinary woman thrown into an extraordinary, horrifying situation. Imagine the panic, the confusion, the sight of a young girl murdered in cold blood. Her recollection is unreliable at best. The great CBI, a top-tier investigative agency, mind you, builds their entire case on this shaky foundation, a door supposedly locked from the inside. But the very fact that the maid needed the key contradicts this. If the door was bolted from within, why the key at all? Their proof is no proof at all. It's nothing more than a convenient explanation to close the case, to avoid looking deeper. In the end, it all comes down to this: a contaminated crime scene, an unreliable witness, a poorly constructed theory, and doors that tell us nothing definitive. The truth, as it often is, lies somewhere beyond these locked doors, somewhere they failed to look. And there you have it. The door wasn't locked from the inside. The maid's statement? Utterly compromised. Which means their airtight case, well, it's got more holes than Swiss cheese. And that, my dear Watson, is the undoing of their entire theory. And yet, the question remains, if not the Talwars, then who? If this case were to be re-examined today, things would be different. Touch DNA, on the whiskey bottle, the terrace door, the blanket, maybe even the weapons. Yes, weapons, plural. The post-mortem indicates both a blunt object and a sharp one were used. That's two different weapons, possibly two different killers. Behavioral analysis, modern forensic techniques, even digital forensics, there's more to uncover here. More than what was found at the time in 2007. So, let's play a game, shall we? A game called Guess the Killer. A killer with access to the house, intimate knowledge of the victim's routines, and the calculated precision of a surgeon. This wasn't an opportunistic crime. It was deliberate. But the blood on the whiskey bottle, that's the key, isn't it? A post-murder drink, a sign of control. Someone close, very close. Modern investigative techniques could still hold the answers. Touch DNA from that whiskey bottle, digital forensics, and advanced behavioral analysis, all tools that could shed light on this mystery. A case mishandled is not a case closed. So, who killed Aarushi and Hemraj? The clues, my dears, point to a calculated mind, a personal vendetta, and a tangled web of deception. Perhaps the killer is still out there, their secret intact. But secrets, like murder, always leave a trace. So, what do I think? This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. It was planned, executed with precision, and the aftermath was controlled. The Talwars? Guilty of hiding something, perhaps. But guilty of murder? That remains uncertain. The real killer, or killers, knew how to evade detection. They knew how to manipulate the scene. And they knew the Talwar's weakness, what every Indian is afraid of, fear of public shame. The 2007 Noida Double Murder Case remains unsolved, yes, but not unsolvable. And that, dear viewers, is the difference. This case isn't over. Because, the truth? It's still out there. The game's not over. Not yet. Right. So, here's the brilliance of it all. The Talwar case, unsolved for years, a web of missteps, botched investigations, and whispers of conspiracy. And yet, the answer? Blindingly obvious. Bloody fingerprints on the whiskey bottle, a bloody palm print on the rooftop, it's all staring you in the face, begging to be found. Now, typically you'd run those prints through a national database, cross-check them, and voila! You've got your killer, yeah? But no, not in India. Here, we have a little thing called the Aadhaar Act of 2016, passed under the ruling government. You'd think the largest biometric database in the world, over 1 billion people's fingerprints and iris scans, would be a goldmine for criminal investigations. But, oh no, that would be too easy, wouldn't it? The Unique Identification Authority of India, in all its bureaucratic wisdom, says the law enforcement cannot use Aadhaar identity biometrics for criminal investigations. Not allowed. Hands tied. Which means that those unidentified bloody fingerprints, well, we can't touch them. And the killer or killers walk free. But let's entertain a thought. If I had my hands on those bloody prints, and we could legally run them through Aadhaar? Oh, the simplicity. You feed the prints into the system, hit search, and, ding. You have your answer. Your killer, or killers, identified in moments. A case that baffled everyone, solved by nothing more than a fingerprint and a sensible use of technology. But alas, red tape. Bureaucracy at its finest. Still, the solution was always right there. The prints were the key. Run them through Aadhaar, and there's no mystery left to solve. The Talwars, whether guilty of murder or merely victims of circumstance, would finally have their answers. Another case that could have been solved in the blink of an eye if the powers that be hadn't tied themselves in knots with rules. Another cold case cracked. Simple as that. Now, what's next?